Hello, I'm Tom Wilkinson, and welcome back to the Thinking in English podcast, a podcast for intermediate to advanced level English learners. I have lived abroad for about 5 of the past 8 or 9 years. I have lived in Japan as a worker, a student, and now a spouse, and also in Taiwan as a student as well. People often ask me how I moved overseas. So today I want to talk about this topic. I'll discuss the state of migration, some of the common visa types or methods of moving overseas, and a few steps you may need to take to move abroad. At the same time, I will share my own immigration experiences. You can find a full transcript of this episode for free on Spotify, Apple, and on my website. I have also just started uploading ad-free, advertisement-free episodes for my Patreon subscribers. All episodes from last August going forward into the future will be on Patreon with no ads. You can also listen on Spotify, no ads. That's for my Patreon subscribers. Here is today's vocabulary list. Abroad. Abroad. In or to a foreign country. For example, she has always dreamed of studying abroad. Migration. Migration. The movement of people from one place to another, especially to live or work in a different country or region. For example, the migration of workers from rural areas to big cities has increased in recent years. Sponsor. Sponsor. To support or be responsible for someone, often financially or legally. As in, the university sponsored several international students for their study visas. Visa. Visa. An official document or stamp in a passport that allows a person to enter, stay, or leave a country for a specific period or purpose. As in, he applied for a student visa to study in Canada for 2 years. Spouse. Spouse. A person legally married to another. For example, after getting married, she applied for a spouse visa to join her husband in the UK. Residency. Residency. The state of living in a particular place. For example, he applied for permanent residency in Australia after living there for 5 years. Temporary. Temporary. Lasting for only a limited period, not permanent. As in, she moved to France on a temporary work visa valid for 1 year. Over the years, I've had the privilege of living in a few different countries. I have moved overseas as a student, as a worker, and now as a spouse. Recently, I've become aware of a common theme among many of my friends and family in the UK, in the US, and in other countries. They also want to move abroad. It seems like many people feel unsatisfied with their lives in their home countries, whether it's due to political instability, high taxes, difficult weather conditions, a lack of career opportunities, or the desire for a new challenge. Moving abroad can seem like a potential solution to many of these issues. I'm sure many of you have thought about leaving your country too. But how do you make this happen? What steps do you need to take? Today, we're going to explore all of that. I'll talk from my experience as an immigrant to Japan, and also my knowledge as someone who studied migration, immigration, and citizenship at graduate school. Of course, everything we talk about today is situation dependent. Every person's path to moving abroad will be different based on their personal circumstances, skills, and connections. If you are planning on moving abroad, one of the most important things to think about is your language skills and your language level. If you're looking for a job in the UK, for example, you probably need to be studying business English to make sure that your English is good enough for the workplace environment. When I moved to Japan, I took intensive classes 3 times a week for the first 2 years. I still take Japanese classes now. If you're interested in taking English classes, I can recommend wholeheartedly Lingoda. Lingoda is an amazing online English school. Every Lingoda class is led by a highly qualified native level English teacher. Lingoda's classes are flexible. There's a personalized learning experience, self-learning tools that can help you learn English. And most importantly, they offer classes and courses in both English and business English, as well as in Spanish and Italian and other languages as well. The Lingoda Flex plan allows you to learn at your own pace. It's a flexible course where you can take classes that run every hour of every day and fit them into your own schedule. Or if you want to learn quickly and advance quickly, the Lingoda Sprint is a 2-month learning challenge where you take classes daily or every second day, and you can get a big reward if you complete all the classes. 50% of your cashback or more free classes. If you're interested in taking a Lingoda class, I have a deal for you. You can save €20 or the equivalent in your own currency by using my link in the description or using the discount code ThinkingMarch. That's ThinkingMarch. €20 off your subscription by using my link. Go and take a Lingoda course. Migration is the movement of people across borders, and it's not a new phenomenon. For centuries, people have moved for a variety of reasons, including for economic opportunities, escaping war or persecution, or seeking better living conditions. In the past 500 years alone, trade took Chinese and Arab traders all across Asia. Persecution drove Jews in Spain and the Huguenots in France to find new homes. Colonialism took European settlers to the Americas, along with millions of African slaves. Once slavery was made illegal, the European empires took indentured workers, mainly from India and China, all across the world. The industrialization of the Americas and also Australia and New Zealand in the 19th and early 20th centuries led to the migration of massive numbers of people. Around 50 million people left Europe during this period, searching for a better life. After World War II, Western Europe needed labour, and they turned to their former colonies. Millions of workers from the Caribbean and South Asia settled in Britain, while France imported labour from their African colonies, and Germany from Turkey. At the same time, Australia was offering British people the opportunity to move across the world for just £10. At the time, Australia only accepted white immigrants, and especially British immigrants. Places like the USA and Australia were considered countries of immigration, meaning they accepted new immigrants, while places like Italy and Spain were considered countries of emigration, meaning many Italian and Spanish people moved overseas. Since the 1970s, some of the traditional countries of emigration have also become countries of immigration. Italy now has a high number of immigrants, while the traditional countries of immigration, like the USA and Australia, have become much stricter in allowing people to move there. The development of the Middle East has opened opportunities for massive immigration, as well as newly developed countries like Thailand and Malaysia attracting immigrants from other parts of Asia. In recent decades, much of the world has seen a shift towards more restrictive immigration policies. Many countries that were once known for their openness have become more selective about who they allow in. Many governments have implemented points-based systems, or have specific categories that determine who can migrate based on skills, education, and work experience. Countries like Japan, where I live, the UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand all prioritize skilled workers. They want people with degrees, years of experience, and skills that might be in shortage. If you are wealthy, high-skilled, or highly educated, there are still many opportunities to move around the world. The UK, for example, has a specific visa for graduates of a world top 50 university. Some European countries have investor visas or digital nomad visas for remote workers that have a certain income level. But at the same time, opportunities for permanent, low-skilled migration are decreasing. Some countries have temporary visas for low-skilled work, and the EU has movement of labour within the EU for EU citizens, but these often give limited opportunity to permanently settle somewhere, unless you are an EU citizen. I'd like to now talk about some of the different ways to move abroad that are common around the world right now. These are the main methods, I think, but I'm sure there are many ways that I won't mention. For example, some countries have reciprocal work agreements, while others have working holiday or youth mobility treaties, or specific internship visas, or refugee statuses, of course. But I think the following are the main ways that most people move overseas. Ancestry or citizenship by descent. Let's start with one of the easiest and most direct ways to move abroad, through ancestry or citizenship by descent. This option is available if you can trace your family lineage back to a country that offers citizenship to descendants of nationals. Not all countries do this, but some, like Ireland, Italy, Poland, and Germany, have laws that allow you to apply for citizenship if you can prove that you have parents, grandparents, or sometimes even great-grandparents from that country. Other countries offer special visas for descendants of citizens, so rather than citizenship, you can get a visa as a foreigner because of your ancestry. I've put this as the easiest method to move abroad because it is often faster, cheaper, and more straightforward than other methods if you have that passport already. If you have a German ancestor, you can potentially gain German citizenship and the right to move, live, and work around the entire European Union without needing a degree or a job offer or to be married in advance. However, it's only available for people with citizenship or ancestry. Marriage or family reunification. If you marry a citizen of a country, or if you are the immediate family member, so a spouse, children, parents of someone living in a foreign country, you may be able to apply for family reunification visas or spouse visas. Marriage is one of the most common ways people move abroad, and many countries have relatively straightforward ways for married couples to immigrate. This is how I am in Japan. It took 1 month from being married to receiving my Japanese spouse visa. And after 3 years of being married, I become eligible for permanent residence. In other countries, it can be more challenging. I know the USA has very long wait times, and the UK process is now very expensive. However, if you have the resources and you're happy to wait, spousal visas allow you to move overseas relatively easily. Of course, this opportunity is only available to a small group of people. But for those people, it's a relatively easy way to move abroad. This is the only way I could continue working on thinking in English in Japan. As a spouse in Japan, I have no work restrictions, unlike all other visa types. Study visas. Student visas are typically one of the easiest routes for foreign nationals to enter a country, particularly if you've been accepted to an accredited school or university. Most countries offer study visas to foreign students who have been accepted to a full-time academic program. The catch here is that a student visa is temporary. While it allows you to stay for the length of your course, it usually won't automatically lead to permanent residency. So, if you intend to stay after graduation, you'll likely need to transition to another type of visa, such as a work visa or a post-graduation visa. Work visa. The work visa is one of the more common and accessible paths for people who want to live abroad long term. If you have been offered a job in a foreign country, you may be able to apply for a work visa. Work visas generally require sponsorship from your employer, meaning the company has to apply for your visa on your behalf. In some cases, work visas are capped, meaning that only a limited number of applicants are approved each year. And often, there are strict requirements to meet. For example, only certain jobs may be eligible for work visas. Digital nomad visa. A relatively new type of visa in recent years is the digital nomad visa. This type of visa is designed for people who want to work remotely and move to a country without being tied to a specific employer. The advantage of a digital nomad visa is that it allows you to live abroad while maintaining your job with a company in your home country or working as a freelancer. However, there are often very strict requirements for this type of visa. You need proof of employment to meet income thresholds, purchase health insurance, come from a specific country, and the visas are often temporary. The Japanese digital nomad visa, for example, only lasts for 6 months and gives you no residency benefits. It's basically a tourist visa that lets you work. Investor or entrepreneur visas. Often the most difficult, or I guess the most costly route to move abroad is through an investor visa or an entrepreneur visa. This either requires you to invest a lot of money into a country's economy or start a business in that country. And of course, this is difficult because you need the money or you need the idea to come up with a company. Now I've introduced all of those visa types and ways of moving abroad, we have to think about the actual steps. First thing is to research the country you want to move to. You need to check what visa options are available to you, whether there are job opportunities, the cost of living, and other issues like languages. I actually did this the other way around. When I first moved to Japan, I found the job first. But I knew right from the beginning that if I was accepted for the job, I would have not a guaranteed visa, but an almost guaranteed visa. You then need to decide how you will, or if you can, move to the country you want to move to. You will need to see if you qualify for a valid visa. For example, if you want to work there, you probably need to find a company to sponsor you, which could take months or even years of searching. You also need to make sure you qualify for a work visa. In Japan, you need a university degree or 10 years of experience in one field just to get the visa, not to get a job. If you want a student visa, you will need to gain admission to an institution. Or if you want an investor visa, do you have enough money to invest in a company or property? The next step is preparing all of the documents and applying. Often you need a lot of documents, and you need to do a lot of translation. And usually all of the forms will be in the language of the country you want to move to. So when I applied for my spousal visa, or technically I should say my certificate of entry for Japan, I needed passport copies, birth certificates, marriage certificates, my wife's family history, my resume and my work history, copies of my wife's employment contract, evidence of our marriage being real, so photos and letters from her family, copies of my degree and language qualifications, and probably some other stuff I have forgotten. The method of applying for a visa is different depending on the type of visa and the country. I can tell you my experiences, but it will be different for you. I have had 3 visas, or 3 statuses of residence in Japan that allowed me to live here. 2 of my visas, or residence statuses, were directly provided by the Japanese government. I worked for the government as a teacher, and I studied as a government scholar. This meant I could skip some of the steps, and I just needed to fill in the application form. For my spousal visa, my wife had to apply. She was sponsoring me, so she had to apply for a certificate of entry. Once she received that, she could give it to me, and then I could apply for a visa, using that as evidence. Some countries require you to have interviews or provide biometric information like your fingerprints. You also need to pay. Sometimes you pay in advance, like in the UK, you have to pay in advance, and if it's failed, you don't get your money back. And other times you only pay if your application is successful. Like I think in Japan, you only pay afterwards. While this is all going on, you also need to be planning your finances. There are a lot of different expenses when moving abroad. It's expensive. Visa fees, flights, living expenses for the first few months, or the entire time if you're a student, housing deposits, money for furniture. It's all very expensive. You will also need to think about insurance if you need it, healthcare, housing, and other arrangements specific for your situation, like preparing for your new job you're taking or entering university. Once you have your visa, if your application is successful of course, it's then time to finalize your flight plans, open bank accounts, set up phone numbers, and start living in your new country. After you have got your residence status, your visa, that's when the challenge begins. That's when you have to start living in a foreign country. It can take months, sometimes even years to get everything fully set up. It took me months to open bank accounts and set my business up correctly here. Importantly, you also need to make sure you stay up to date with your visa. Renew it when it is expiring. If you have a work visa, you need to keep working because that's why you're in the country. If you have a student visa, you'll probably need to study a certain number of hours a week. Once your circumstances change, you'll need to apply to a new visa or leave until you get a permanent residence or citizenship. So here is today's final thought. Millions of people move overseas every year, for work, for marriage, for study, or even to escape from war. But there are a few misconceptions I think people have about moving abroad. First, just because you want to move to a country doesn't necessarily mean that country wants you or needs you. This might sound harsh, but it's unfortunately true. Many people discover this the hard way, after they've invested significant time, money, or effort into that process. I always had an idea that maybe I would move to the USA one day, but after looking at the requirements to get a work visa in the US, it seemed almost impossible. Even if you have the perfect skills, the best education, or a strong desire to live abroad, it doesn't guarantee that you'll be able to easily gain access to a foreign country. Many countries have rules that a company can only hire a foreign worker if they cannot find a suitable person already living in the country. Another point is that it's often easier to move temporarily than to stay permanently. Short-term visas like student visas or temporary work visas or tourist visas are usually easier to get than permanent residency or citizenship. It is relatively easy to live in a country for a year or two, especially if you have the money to study abroad. But the real challenge comes when you try to stay permanently or move beyond a temporary immigration route. Sometimes there is no way to go from student visa to permanent residency. In the UK, for example, it is really difficult for students from abroad who graduate to find a job. They need to have a relatively high salary, so companies aren't incentivized to give jobs to international students, and then the company has to sponsor them, and it's a whole process. Out of all of the international students I knew while doing my master's degree in London, the only ones who stayed in the UK had EU pre-settled status, meaning that they could stay because they were EU citizens before the UK left the EU. No one from any other country, Japan, China, Taiwan, Mexico, no one stayed in the UK. However, it is possible. There are many different routes, opportunities, and roles out there. And once you find that job or opportunity, moving abroad can be one of the best decisions possible. If you study abroad and you work hard and you get your language skills to a good enough level and you show a company you are worth hiring, they might hire you. Only the other day, I was talking with one of my Patreon subscribers who is living in London as an architect, and the company liked her so much they sponsored her visa to stay in the UK as an architect from being a language school student. So it is possible. Many of my friends in Japan went from student visas to work visas, working for banks, investment companies, as teachers, as educators. But how about you? Are you interested in moving abroad? In fact, if you live abroad already, please in the comments let us know how. How did you move abroad? What path did you take to migrate, to immigrate to another country? Thank you all so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I will speak to you next time. Goodbye.